Hey, everyone. The day has finally come where we can tell everybody what we are doing for Invisible Walls episode 200. And here it is, folks. Episode 200 is going to be 100% live. A live Invisible Walls. Right now, the date that we have is Thursday, March 1st at 6 p.m. Pacific. The show will be live. We're going to do some really cool stuff on the show. We're not going to give it all away today. But we're going to have some cool guests. We're going to do a ton of giveaways, and we're going to answer your questions live on the air.
And it's going to be live video.
Right.
Yes, as in they can see our gorgeously wonderful faces.
You will be able to see us and much, much more. I think it's going to be awesome. Make sure you guys all tune in again. And this is obviously a different day than you're used to watching the show. Thursday, March 1st at 6 p.m. Pacific. As we get closer, we'll do like a time conversion for you guys so everyone around the world knows when to tune in.
But we're pretty bad at math.
Yeah, apparently we're not so good at that. Also want to thank everybody who tuned in to our first ever episode of GT Live here on GameTrailers. We did an hour-long walkthrough of Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, which we'll be talking about on the show today. Actually, Miguel, you did a great job hosting that. I think an hour's not easy to pull off talking about a game, but I think you did it pretty well.
Right on. Thank you. I'm glad you guys digged it.
Digged it. And as another note, we're doing another GT Live this Monday. It's going to be an hour long, again at 6 p.m. Pacific. We are going to basically blow out the PlayStation Vita for you guys. You guys will be able to ask us any questions you want about it. You'll be able to tell us what games to put into the system. Essentially, you are going to be driving your own tour of the PlayStation Vita on GT Live this Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific. So make sure you show up. It's pretty cool. There's a chat interface. You can ask questions on the fly. So anyway, here we are at episode 197, just a few weeks away from 200. The games are flowing pretty well for this time of year, I would say. Some big games. Obviously, we said we'll talk about Kingdoms of Amalur in a little bit. Been kind of polarizing across the industry as far as review scores and opinions go. I think that should be a good discussion. Already heard from pretty much everybody on the panel today. Marcus is here.
Hello.
Ryan is here.
And I'll be leaving.
But he'll be here for a bit.
I'm confusing.
Miguel is here.
Hey, what's up?
And I am here, Shane Satterfield. Let's get it going. Okay, to kick things off, we're going to make a quick run through the biggest news in the gaming industry over the last week. The first story is Notch and his mountains and mountains of money that he made block by block with Minecraft.
And now he wants to give back.
He is, which is pretty freaking awesome. So there's this little game for the Xbox from many years ago that everybody that played absolutely loved. It absolutely tanked. In fact, I think it single-handedly may have sunk Majesco.
Oh, no, Advent Rising.
Yeah.
Advent Rising, I think, was the nail in the coffin.
That may have been the 1-2 punch.
They're actually still around, though. Don't they do, like, Cooking Mama or something?
Yeah.
Aren't they doing the Avengers game?
Yeah. I mean,
Really?
they do small projects now. They do a lot of
Oh.
handheld stuff, but they're not big major console players like they were back then. The game is Psychonauts, Tim Schafer's sort of love child. We all loved it. I would probably say we could all agree.
Yeah, it's a great game.
Great game, very funny, very creative, very innovative. A lot of people have asked for the sequel. Well, probably all 29,000 people that bought the original have asked for a sequel. Up to this point, they couldn't rationalize it financially. Now Notch has stepped in, and he's reached out to Tim Schafer saying, I will fund Psychonauts 2.
Has Tim Schafer actually responded? Like, all I saw on Twitter was him making coy allusions to the offer. Like, is anything actually going down?
Well, they're funnily enough, DICE is going on this week, and they're all at DICE at the same time. So I'm guessing there is probably some sort of conversations going on. I think the problem with Psychonauts was Majesco couldn't market igloos to the Middle East. I mean, they have no clue.
Well, I mean, to play devil's advocate, I love the game, but it was a little weird.
No, it is
very weird.
It's a very weird and surreal game. But the marketing was they didn't know what to do with it. And I think what I'd like to see is maybe Psychonauts come back as a downloadable game, stick it
Episodic,
on XBLA.
maybe?
Well, no, stick the
Oh,
first
it actually
one on
worked.
XBLA.
Everyone's
and then
brain memories or whatever could be an episode.
Yeah, and then the second one could be episodic because I don't think that I mean, I don't know how much money Mr. Notch has.
I'm guessing he has a lot.
I'm sure
He got that Lego deal as well.
I'm
which
sure
is pretty
he's got a
asinine.
fair chunk of change. But I mean, does he have the 20 to 30 million to invest in a game like this? Who would publish it? So I'm thinking
He does, actually.
Well, no, I'm just saying that.
I don't. I mean,
I'm playing devil's
I'd be
advocate.
surprised if he were to throw down a chunk of money, he probably wouldn't be the only party doing so, right? Like, it would be the beginning of funding.
It'd be like the biggest Kickstarter project ever.
Right. Well, my question is, like, now that Tim Schafer and Double Fine have a bit more profile than they did back in the Xbox days, like, I don't know, would it have seemed out of the realm of possibility for this game to come about through like a more conventional deal, like EA publishing it or something?
I think after Brutal Legend, Brutal Legend was a title that Vivendi didn't really know what to do. Then it ended up at Activision. They kind of passed it on to EA, and EA didn't really know how to market it either, because it was it was a difficult game to market. Tim Schafer, unless it's the Sesame Street or the Muppets games, I mean, he does do games that are slightly out of left field.
Oh yeah, which is why we love him.
No, the critical darlings, but I mean, I think EDAR put out a top Xbox Live Arcade stuff for 2011, and I mean, I think like From Dust and Castle Crashers for like the 4th year in a row, like we're at the top of the list. But I don't think I saw Costume Quest or Trenched, or what's Trenched called now?
No, Trench was in the top 10.
It was
called like Iron Eagle now or something.
Yeah, Iron Brigade.
Iron Brigade.
Yeah. I know those games, Stacking and stuff, those were all pretty well received, but I don't think they were runaway hits.
I mean, let's put ourselves in the shoes of Notch's financial advisor, which I'm guessing he probably doesn't have at this point, but he'll get one very soon.
Oh, I'm sure he
No,
probably
when I
has.
interviewed him, I mean, one of the first things he did for, what's the name of his company?
Mojang.
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 One of the first things he did was hire a CEO because he didn't want to deal with the business stuff.
Who hopefully will not rob him blind. But let's say we're all his financial advisors. Marcus, would you tell him to go forward with this?
Am I a financial advisor who's also a gamer? And Shane's nodding his head. So yes, I would. I would say go episodic, go downloadable, and just test the waters and see if you can free up the original Psychonauts from the carcass that is Majesco and stick that out on XBLA and PSN and Steam. There's a market for this. Slap it out there for $15. Use it as a very smart marketing tool, because people, I think, now will probably love it more because they're going to be way more aware of it.
Ryan?
Pretty much what he said. I don't know if episodic's really the right way to go, but yeah, make an episode. Thinking more about the nuts and bolts, maybe you have to do some weird tutorial bullshit to get people back into the swing of the game. But the game does lend itself to that sort of play.
Miguel?
I would, certainly. I think the industry's changed since the original Psychonauts came out, and I think it's now possible to do things on different kinds of scale, where I could see something like this making a lot of sense. And I think there's an audience for it. I think that all the sort of names involved will bring something to it that I think will be substantial.
And I think all three of you are batshit crazy.
Here we go, raining on my parade.
I think Notch might as well flush that money down the toilet, and I think his financial advisor would be unemployed 2 months later.
Well,
you really think that if Notch were to basically make this happen and then promote it through all his channels, you don't think that all the people who are into Minecraft and all the people who are into Double Fine would at least make it break even?
No.
I think.
How about buy Psychonauts and you get a special block for your Minecraft?
That might make it happen.
I think that the market's ready and could do something like this, downloadable only, not as a retail title, and then I'd look forward to the Psychonauts Lego deal, because that would be next.
I mean, the best downloadable games do around 200,000 in sales. I mean, when you're talking about high production values, I mean, if they were maybe to call it back and maybe make it less ambitious than the original was,
don't overlook those Steam sales. I mean, I know they're making less money, but that shot Super Meat Boy over 1 million.
I don't think this has to mean Notch sinking Mojang's entire fortune into it, right? It could.
Well, no, because he'll regenerate that 20 million in about 3 days, but and that's not even really an exaggeration. I want to play another Psychonauts, but if it was my money, I wouldn't do it. Next story. So we heard a few months back that, with the Vita, you'd be able to somehow transfer your UMDs to your new PlayStation Vita system. We were kind of wondering how that would even be technically feasible. Well, now word has come out that this feature will not be available in the States. How do you guys feel about that? One, why would it not be available in the States but available elsewhere?
I think, just as I said, Majesco really had no clue with Psychonauts. I think that Sony don't really know what they're doing right now with the Vita. It hasn't been the success that they expected in Japan. And, all the people who are now flaming me on the comments saying, it sold week 1 and week 2. It's selling less than the it's selling less than the Xbox 360 in Japan.
Yeah,
I can't give it more of a slap than that, which is a shame because it's a really great little console.
Yeah.
And I know you spent a couple of nights playing with it.
Yep.
I think that Sony are caught in a rock and a hard place. I understand that Jack Tretton's actually coming to LA next week as this big part of like PR outreach to get to the news people and say, look, buy the Vita. But yeah, I don't think they know their ass from their elbow, and this is just another stupid way to alienate your potential your fan base who've supported the PSP and bought the PSP. Go fuck yourself. And
But what is their rationale for not doing it?
Yeah, and how would this, based upon what you said, tanked in Japan? I want to say tanked, but didn't do as well as they hoped in Japan. You're hoping it does better in the United States, so why would you do something like this and kind of lessen its chances of success in another market?
I think it probably comes down to them not wanting to reward everybody who's pirated the PSP games, right?
Well, I mean, we don't know the details on how it works. Like, I don't know if there's a unique number on every UMD and you input that somehow on it down. I mean, you got to assume that they have some kind of security measures in place already where pirates aren't going to be able to get the games for free.
It's called the honor system.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Just imagine the most obvious one and imagine how much of a disaster it could be. Like, if you're the guy who bought the game and then dumped it and put it online, the first person who inputs your quote-unquote code is going to have access to your game on Vita. And then
No, I don't think that's how it works. I don't think it's in the code itself. I think the code on every UMD
It's like a
disc is the
serial
same.
number.
Like a
Oh,
serial
okay.
number on the actual
Yeah.
physical casing of the UMD.
Okay.
At least that's not what I would assume.
I'm just confused why they waited to announce that they weren't doing it so late in the game. I mean, the people getting the 3G ones are getting them next week,
Right.
And this is like a week out for a lot of people. For the hardcore guys who really want the Vita, this is like a week out. It just seems kind of a weird move.
And this would be the target demographic, because if you pre-order a Vita, it's pretty much obvious you had a PSP or whatever. I think one of the things I'll throw in there as a potential sticking point is it might be down to third parties. It might be down to agreements that they locked down in Japan for just Japanese versions of the game, and maybe when it came to negotiating with EA, Ubi, Activision, maybe these guys said, no, we want people to buy the full thing. And then, Sony were like, well, we literally have nothing right now. I think they've been stupid in turning around and saying, no, it's not coming. I think they should have said, we're going to evaluate the success of the system in Japan. And, they should have looked at it and then perhaps saved it as an announcement for E3. It's just another, 2 steps forward, 18 feet back.
Will it deter any of you guys from getting the system? Does it change whether you've decided to get it
I
or
wasn't
not?
planning on getting one right away anyway.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for a it's about the software, and Uncharted's not going to make me get the game. What made me get a PSP back in the day was Patapon.
Yeah,
If that
yeah.
puts that into
Odd
perspective.
games sometimes tip you over the top.
So
with,
yeah,
handheld.
just I don't know, maybe Luminous.
What about
But
sound
I doubt
shapes?
it. I want to play it first. I mean, I'm very intrigued, and I loved Everyday Shooter, but I'm not sure if that's quite. And
It's kind of in that vein, though. Quirky.
but a lot of it's also the application aspect of it, the sequencer, and I like playing games for games. That added stuff is cool, but it's not always the biggest draw for me personally.
For me, I've said it before, I didn't pre-order it. I wouldn't go out my way to buy it. I'm kind of lucky that, yes, I'm going to have access to one next week for my other segment. And I'm of the same, there's some cool games out there. Uncharted is kind of fun. Is it a $50 game to me? Perhaps not. Actually, the most fun I had recently was at a Vita event a couple of weeks ago, and I played Escape Plan, which is a $15 downloadable game. It feels...
Did they confirm that price point?
Yeah, they confirmed
Oh,
it at
wow,
the event,
okay.
which is being done literally next door at Sony Santa Monica. And that was a fun little game. But again, the issue I had with that, even though I loved it, is it felt like an iPad game. It felt like something I should be paying $4.99 for.
Yeah. I think paying $50 for a handheld game is going to be a tough sell because people are assuming that their mobile platforms, the games are getting cheaper.
And Capcom's getting it. They dropped the price. I mean, starting to get it. They did that last-minute price drop on Revelations.
Yeah.
And there's actually, GameStop, I've been reading some tweets this week that GameStop have a bunch of Vita games on sale already to sort of stimulate people.
People have been buying them on PSN as well.
And then the other thing, which I'm sure Sony are absolutely delighted with, is the fact that Nintendo, GameStop have dropped the price on the 3DS this week down to $150.
Yeah.
How do they do that on their own?
It's a temporary price drop.
I wonder if their profit margins are that
I'm sure.
high on that hardware.
I'm sure. So I'm sure
Nin-
Nintendo
yeah.
authorized it, because let's face it, what are you going to do? You're going to drop $300 on a Vita when you can get 2 3DSs for your kids at $150.
Well, since we've thrown that out there, let's just talk about that then. Let's say you're going to buy a new handheld. Would you buy the 3DS at that even cheaper price point, or would you buy a new Vita?
I would get a 3DS just because there's already, I could name 3 games off the top of my head that I would like to play on it.
Keep in mind now the launch lineup for the Vita, while doesn't have a lot of stellar releases, it is pretty large.
Vast.
I mean, right out of the gate, you're going to have 25 games available.
Most of them are ports.
Yeah,
That's the
but
thing.
so
Some
are
of
the 3DS games. So
Yeah, but okay, some of these are like modern day ports. I mean, at least the 3DS stuff. Yeah, there are some modern day ports, but a lot of the throwback N64 stuff. There's been enough time, that
but you
they're
got Street
remakes
Fighter on
and
there,
stuff.
and I mean, there's a few examples of kind of that same game being sloughed over to the new system.
But other than Uncharted, I don't think Sony's really giving anything, at least for the launch lineup, too overwhelming from the first party side.
It's going to be tough to combat Mario Kart, Super Mario 3D Land, and now Resident Evil, which is also a really quality game. I mean, they have 3 games that you can only play on that system at this point.
You raised a good question, and honestly, I can't answer that right now. I really don't. It would be such a tough decision to would I go for a 3DS and 4 or 5 games. Or pay the same price for pay the equivalent price of a Vita and maybe one game.
Conceivably, you could get a 3DS plus Mario Kart plus Mario plus the new Resident Evil, and you probably still would come in lower than what you're paying just for the Vita system.
Yeah.
And a memory card.
And the
memory
Vita
card.
is technically the more inspiring system. It's got this amazing OLED. It's got the touchpad on the back.
But it's all about the games, man.
But it is. It is.
When it comes to the Vita, I think what people are most drawn to right now, and what I'm most drawn to right now, is the appeal of the machine itself. It's slick. It's sexy. When you turn it on, you feel like you're operating this really cool new device. I don't get that in the same way that I on the 3DS.
But how long before that wears off? When
Sure,
the
yeah,
only thing you're
almost
picking up is the same
immediately,
game, yeah.
right? Like it doesn't last.
It doesn't
for shit.
last long.
They do. I mean, they have Street Fighter X Tekken is a launch event. I think a launch title. They have Uncharted. They do
Marvel
FIFA.
vs. Capcom.
Marvel vs. Capcom. Yeah, they have a lot of really good stuff there. Day one, which is they do have a better lineup than the 3DS actually launched with. Yeah.
I think the other part of it, too, is that with the 3DS, you kind of had that meta stuff that you did with the system, like Find Me, that we all got crazy addicted to here. I don't see a lot of that stuff.
Well, it was supposed to ship with cards. I don't know if that's still happening or not when I talked to them at CES. So
Yeah.
We shall see. So anyway, if you guys want to find out more about the Vita, don't forget Monday, 6 p.m.
Maybe.
No, it's happening, Stevens. Monday, 6 p.m.,
Or
GT
Tuesday.
Live. All right, next we're going to talk about a game that I think we're in love with a lot more than everybody else, at least based on the game's performance on GameTrailers thus far, and that game is Syndicate. Ryan, you've had a chance to check it out.
Yeah, they sent us a preview build of the single player. I'm not going to talk about the co-op. I know a lot of people have been, pardon me, been playing that the demo, the multiplayer demo, which is a little weird. Kind of reminds me of the Resistance 2 thing, but not so rigidly MMO-ish. I think, without saying too much, controversially, I think the game's pretty good so far. It's obviously not like the original game at all. It's a first-person shooter, and yes, I know it shits on that legacy of blah, blah, blah. You want to say anything? I'm assuming you were a Syndicate fan there, Marcus.
Actually, I did. I loved Syndicate, and I love the universe. What I am curious, and I haven't played the demo because I'm just not into demos right now after the Amalur debacle. Does it feel? Is it more out and out shooter, or would you say it leans perhaps more towards the Deus Exification?
No, it is a pure shooter with a couple of bells and whistles.
Spells, right?
Yes, you're a magician. No, you can hack certain things. They call it breaching, but it's hacking. And it takes a little while. The game throws a lot of stuff at you right at the start, so it takes a little while to get acclimated. But it's pretty much you're shooting stuff, and every once in a while you have these applications. Everyone loves apps, and like you can make someone's head blow up, or you can make their guns backfire on them.
How much that would cost on the iTunes store?
Got a 5-star rating. But it feels good. I mean, this is the Starbreeze guys. I know a lot of Starbreeze had a bunch of guys leave in the last couple years, but it still kind of has that Starbreeze feel. The game's linear, unlike Riddick or the original Darkness. But it feels good when you're going around. You have like some weapons that aren't completely like I can't remember. The Gauss gun is kind of like the bullseye from Resistance, where you can tag someone and you'll have curved bullets and stuff like that. Someone can throw a grenade at you. You can defuse it with the breaching mechanic. It's kind of fun, but it is pretty much a lot of shooting. It's got bullet time as a kind of a like a little bit of a stopgap, and you can do melee moves. I mean, a lot of it's kind of like right out of the book, but it just feels good, and it looks good too.
Why do you think no one seems to care about this game?
Well, they kind of stealth launched it, and then the old guard are really upset that it's not an isometric squad-based shooter, or squad-based game, which, everyone liked the old Syndicate because you could, like, fuck around with the game. You turn on the, what was the thing called? Persuadatron, and you get, like, a billion people following you, and, it's just fun to kind of, like, mess with the game. And that was one of Molyneux's things that was good. He could make a game that you could play, but also a toy that you could
play with.
Yes. Like, you saw it in Populous, you saw it in Black and White. But, I think it's a solid shooter. I would say, having played the single player and the multiplayer demo, I would say don't let the multiplayer demo really, I don't know, sway your views for the single player. If you kind of like the cyberpunk thing, and there's a lot of cool references. I think Patrick pointed out that one of the guns is named after someone from Ghost in the Shell, and there's a lot of They Live references. When you turn on your Alt Vision, you can see like weird propaganda messages, like consume more.
Maybe that's maybe that's the reason why people weren't responding to it. Like, Cyberpunk isn't sort of as hot as it was.
Was it ever
in
really?
the 90s?
I don't know. I think Deus Ex was pretty popular.
Yeah, Deus Ex did well, and I think there's a market for it. I think,
but it's a lot of trench coats and like girls with like awesome new wave hair. But yeah,
I mean,
problem with that.
You've also got to remember how long since the last Syndicate, and it's been
19 years.
Yeah, it's been a very long time. There is a whole generation of people now who have no fucking clue what this is.
Sure.
And while going back to that original version and redoing that as per the hardcore people wanted, that would have been an absolute disaster unless you were doing an XBLA or even a Facebook game. But I
By
would,
the same token, XCOM is doing it too. They're doing the
Firaxis one, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks great.
But I think it's interesting that Firaxis now are doing this after the outcry against the XCOM squad-based shooter, and it will be interesting to see if this game is a success. If EA gets smart and say, all right, well, we're going to do look what they're doing with Command and Conquer and BioWare. Yeah. I mean, they might actually go off and I'm not guaranteeing they're going to do it. I would like to see more nods to the past. I'm disappointed that it's a full-on shooter, but I do have a lot of faith in the Starbreeze guys. Worked with them on Riddick. I think they are fantastic. They can tell a story like not many other people do. So I'm gonna be cautiously optimistic.
Do you think is the aesthetic still intact? Does the world feel like it what you'd expect a cool cyberpunk world to feel like?
Once you're actually in the game, there's a little bit of plot stuff in the very beginning, but once you're in the game, it's kind of what's that line? Like out of the frying pan into the fire, just like nonstop, like shit's hit the fan sort of stuff.
Sure.
It's kind of got a little bit of that Fifth Element feel, which is a little cheesy. I think like a lot of bloom, a lot of like towers in the sky stuff, but you're focused a lot on the combat, like from the moment to moment. So. I don't know. Again, going back to the co-op, when you start the co-op mission, if anyone's played it, you're in your little little Humvee or something, and you're staring at your other co-op dudes, and you're all just like, ha ha ha. It's all like trench coats and funny haircuts.
Right.
No, XCOM's not tracking especially high either. How long do you guys think is too long to try and revive a franchise? More than 10 years?
I think you can do it whenever.
There's not I don't think
expect it to be a success.
I mean,
you can do it whenever, obviously, but
I don't think there are hard and fast rules. I think it all depends on how well it's executed. Whether, I don't know, maybe this doesn't matter, but whether the people who were originally into it think that it's like shitting on the legacy of the thing they're into, like maybe that has an effect. But yeah, I mean, if you consider BioShock to be like a resurrection of the
System Shock.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest games out now, and it came from that studio who worked on the original to a degree, and yeah, I mean that's an example of it working, right?
And System Shock, the original System Shock, it turned out to be, nothing like BioShock. I mean, the set in vaguely that universe, but it's all like moved. I think the key is, and this is always the fine line of balancing, the expectations of the fans while bringing a new generation in. And I'm just disappointed that it's a shooter when it could have been perhaps that little bit more, have that little more, whether it be RPG or, just that little
something,
that little X factor that's not just a nod to the past.
Next up on the docket, Darkness 2. Ryan again. You tackled this one. Gave it a pretty good thrashing in the review. Got a 7.4 out of 10.
Yeah, I think around there.
So I think a lot of people were surprised. I was surprised it was that bad. I mean, the first game kind of had some things that were cool.
That's not a bad score.
Well, my expectations were higher because the first game scored around that area. You would assume that a couple years on, they would say, okay, well, let's look at the criticisms of the first game. Let's make this one better, but they really haven't made it better.
Well, it's a completely different game, different studio. It's Digital Extremes, the guys who, they cut their teeth with like early Unreal stuff and Pariah, and what was the game with the glaive or the
Kroll?
The Kroll
That's
game.
the movie.
What was that? Dark Sector.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the best track record for those guys. And basically, I think they took what was kind of the most, I hate to use the word visceral, but the most visceral stuff from the first game, which was like this crazy overabundance of first-person violence that you don't really get to see with guns because they had these tentacles that let you get really up close and personal, which you see this a little to a small degree with some kind of like melee moves in some games, but this let them take it to like another level. But I think what you mentioned is kind of interesting because the Darkness was still kind of in the early throes of HD games, and I think that kind of like level, we were used to first-person shooters, but this like level of kind of and that was a Starbreeze game as well, and they had done Riddick's hand-to-hand melee combats, which I think gave them a good foundation. But it gave this kind of like something that really hadn't been seen before. It definitely hadn't been seen in like high definition with the sort of production values. This time around, they're doing this really interesting take on cell shading that's kind of hit and miss. I believe all the textures were like hand-painted and stuff like that. So the game can look really good at times, or it's always interesting, but it can also look a little off. And they work with all these crazy...
I don't know if cell shading's the right call for a game like that.
Well, it's based on a comic book, and comic books traditionally, except for like the old Keystone stuff, traditionally have the the stroke and the fill be the same. As
right,
opposed
but comic books are comic books because they have to draw them.
Yeah,
it's like you don't have to do that with a video game.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when everyone went apeshit for what was the David?
It's not like when you watch an X-Men movie, like all the characters in the movie have black lines around their edges.
What was
they're normal humans or whatever.
What was the David Duchovny game that was first person? 13? Is that what it was? The French first-person cel-shaded game?
That's
from
right,
Ubisoft.
Was it 13?
Yeah, it was 13, yeah.
I didn't know David Duchovny was in that.
He was the really bored voice. He's like, oh, hey. I'm an assassin. What's going on? Worst voice acting ever. But, and this time around, they put all their, like, I think people are going to play the demo and they're going to love this game, especially like 13-year-old kids. This is like the bread and butter. I mean, I remember when Wolfenstein came out when I was like a preteen, and like the kill cam when you killed like the bosses was like, I thought it was the greatest shit in the world. But you play the game, and it gets a little you get a little fatigued with it. And they're trying to do some of this stupid MMO leveling stuff. It's kind of weird because it's kind of nuanced because you play a game like God of War, and you kill all these dudes. You get your red orbs or whatever the hell it's called,
out of them.
and you level up your Blades of Chaos, and it's cool. Here, it's like there's tech trees and stuff, and you look at it, and it's all kind of boring because they still want to give you all this stuff right away.
He's like, dude, I just have a snake for an arm.
Like, you unlock some
tree?
executions, but then you don't want to. I'd be really shocked if people are really like, oh, extra ammunition for my guns, yeah. Versus like 10 new executions. You're not really going to do it.
How does this? So I'm curious. How far does this stray away from the comic book that it's based on?
Well, I think isn't that a Twitter question that we're going to ask in a moment?
But it is actually. I'm really curious as somebody who loves the comic book series. I mean, and I
have the trade paperback for the original stuff, and the first game followed some of that stuff and strayed as well. This takes place. It has a lot of continuity with the first game. I would actually give the game actually a good nod for. The story gets a little lackluster, and it doesn't feel too... Even though you're like this superhero villain, anti-hero guy, you're never really fighting what you consider like comic book villains. There's some cultists who have some magical abilities and whatnot. But I will say, without spoiling anything, there is a really cool comic book tie-in right at the end. That it's pretty cool, and it sets up for another game, a sequel, or maybe for a trilogy, and it could be really, really interesting. The other thing that I thought was kind of funny for anyone who's played Alan Wake, at one point, there's these enemies that have spotlights, and they follow you, and I felt like, oh, this must be what it's... Because the darkness, his power drains when he's in the light. Right. And I thought this must be what it must feel like to be an enemy in Alan Wake. Because these guys are shining lights on you, and then their buddies are shooting you. I thought it was kind of fun. But Oh, and then just a real quick mention for the co-op. Again, 4 characters, a lot of recycled abilities, couple new weapons to mess around with, ridiculously short. If you play the game, you get a full campaign. New Game Plus lets you go back in there if you want to hunt out the hidden stuff, completely max out your darkness powers. And co-op, you can, again, do this with all these guys, and you can unlock some one-off stuff. So there is, even though both the co-op is about maybe 2 hours long and the campaign's maybe about 6-7 hours long, there is a fair amount of replay, and, the game does have its strengths. It's just I felt pretty fatigued by the end of the game.
So the last question was from Nathan Hume, 94, from Twitter. The next one is from Welsh Edders, and his question is...
That's you, Marcus, right?
It's not actually. He's actually one of my longest Twitter followers, and he's just told, he actually asked several questions. This is the one I pulled out, because, the story is a huge part when you're taking it from a comic book, and, so...
Well, his question is, how does the story compare to the original Darkness? I'm a big fan of the original and want to know.
I would say it's not as good. This is kind of more of a stringing you along. Well, the first Darkness had kind of, origin stories I think are always better than, these when you continue something, because how this is all happening is usually a much more interesting thing.
Yeah.
This pulls up some interesting, again, if you're into the comic, it pulls up some interesting questions about the nature of the darkness itself, and it does some throwbacks to the dead girlfriend from the first game. I know, God, I'm going to get his name wrong. I think it's Paul Jenkins is the guy who wrote this. It's one of the guys from the comics wrote it. It's not Mark Silvestri, though. I think it does an okay job. There's some interesting stuff, but then there's a lot of kind of filler in between. I will give props to, there's these kind of scenes where you're in an asylum, and it's kind of it's your dudes that you've been working with, like your posse, and they're kind of like not themselves, and you're not sure if this is really happening or if it's a dream, and you keep going back to that. And those are pretty entertaining. The stuff in the penthouse, which is the other times where you can talk to your guys, and it's kind of almost entirely story driven, felt a little long in the tooth. But I'd say the story's pretty decent for a comic book game. But the first one just had so many great moments, and I think the nonlinearity and the Starbreeze guys know how to kind of massage that sort of stuff together a bit better than Digital Extremes.
And the last question, if you enjoyed the first Darkness, should you buy Darkness 2?
Isn't this what Redbox is for, right? This is definitely a game you can rent. The first game had really forgettable multiplayer, and now there's a co-op campaign that maybe you can go back to. There's a menu option for DLC. I'm not really sure how they're going to support that in the future. But I would say if you're a big Darkness fan, you could probably do worse. But if you want to save a couple bucks, I'm sure there could be a sale later on.
If only things could be different. If only the Tuatha were gone and my sister was back.
Okay, so now it's time to talk about Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. Let's just kick it off with one of our questions from Twitter, because to be honest with you, I kind of have the same question, Miguel.
Really? I think that's a stupid question, though.
Okay, well, you can answer it and make it sound stupid.
Sure.
The question is from Brendan Flood, and his question is, Amalur's reviews seem mostly positive with better combat than Skyrim. Why is the score so different? So we gave Amalur an 8.2. Skyrim's at, like a 9.5, I think.
That was a 9.3, I think.
9.3.
Yeah.
So a full point higher.
Sure. I don't like this question because it's basically the guy saying, why didn't you like Amalur as much as I did?
He hasn't played it.
It's a valid question, but I think you and I had a discussion before this started, and you actually have a valid response to this. I mean,
I can also preface it by saying I don't think it's just your review. It's everybody's. Like if you watch all the reviews, people basically gush over the game and say the combat's awesome, best combat they've played in an RPG like this, and then the score is much lower than other games who have worse combat. So I think a lot of people are wondering.
You didn't review Skyrim, did you?
No, I didn't.
Was Justin, right?
Yeah, and I don't think. I mean, the combat in this game is cool. It's a good take. It's a good sort of a smart distillation of what you see in a lot of action games applied to an RPG. But I wouldn't go as far as to say this is the best combat in this kind of RPG ever.
What game would you say has that?
I mean, I don't know.
Are there any that has combat even like that?
Like this?
I can't think of any.
I think the closest thing to this is Fable.
Yeah.
There's fewer
And
button combos.
I can tell you, having reviewed the last several Fables for GT, that the combat in Amalur is far superior. I
think the combat in Amalur is an evolution of what Fable 3 should have been. Fable 2 was kind of good, needed a step up.
Yeah.
But Amalur, I think the combat is a lot of fun. It feels almost more like a hack and slash. as opposed to where you're going into VATS in Fallout, or
Sure.
you do feel this disconnected with melee in
like that
Skyrim.
Melee.
But
The deadly
Amalur
melee.
does a couple of things phenomenally well. Combat is a hoot with
Well,
primary weapons,
let me stop
secondary
you right there.
weapons.
Combat, I think the first half of the equation is good. You get a lot of good feedback. Combat looks cool. They managed to do a lot with a sort of pretty simple system.
It's easy to slip into.
Sure,
as well.
but the other half is that the enemies are basically stupid. And
But that's not the combat system. That's just them not scaling the enemies to match.
well, I
The
think
combat itself, the actual mechanics of the combat, kind of hard to say a lot of things negative about it, right? If they just scaled the hit points of the enemies up, then maybe it's okay.
Right. But if you're using that combat to sort of go up against enemies that don't provide much of a challenge, it kind of loses its luster. It's
Right,
not,
but that's not the combat mechanics. The guy
No,
who
well-
spent 3 years working on the combat, who
Oh
actually
yeah, no,
was on the show,
I'll pat that guy.
That's
in the
not
back.
his
Yeah,
fault.
That was well conceived, and I think it works well. And I think, ultimately, I think it's easy when you're making a game like this that's so big, that has so many possibilities. I wouldn't be surprised if balance is one of the first things that kind of runs away from you if you aren't super careful.
Now, do you think if they were to patch this game later on and say they add a game plus where the enemies do scale and it's actually a challenge throughout the entire game, how much do you think that would affect your opinion of the game?
I think if I felt that I had to bring sort of my brain to bear more when I was doing combat, I certainly would have liked it more. If scaling is the answer to that, I don't know. I mean, they kind of went with an MMO approach where the levels of enemies varies depending on where you are. So the ones you encounter early on are kind of weak, whereas if you go farther in. But that's the thing. Even when I was high level and I was in the very end game area, I was still kicking the shit out of everything.
But now let's be honest here. I mean, let's look at a game like Skyrim. Because, people who played Skyrim, a lot of them were one-hitting every enemy except for a few that were sprinkled throughout the game that they actually did scale. There's a couple bosses that they scaled, but the rest of the game they didn't. So it's very easy in Skyrim to become...
I actually disagree on that one. I mean, as somebody who's, I've how long I've locked into Skyrim, and there are... enemies,
I finished the game.
As you progress through, there are, yes, you get very, very powerful, and there are enemies you can torch with a single thing. But especially, I think, in the first sort of 30 to 40 hours of the game, if you were soloing, and even if you got a character with you, there are enemies that will turn around and kick your ass, and they're not necessarily. It's not the dragons. Some of the dragons actually become easier to fight as you progress. Yeah.
Right. So there are certain enemy types, like bandits will always scale with you. So you'll see absurd shit like a bandit killing a dragon.
Right.
But I think maybe that's part of the answer. Like that works for Skyrim sometimes, but then other times you go in and you're like,
I finished the game and I didn't do a ton of side quests. I finished it in like 30 hours, and by the end of the game, I was pretty much walking through the end of the game.
Well, there's definitely areas in in the side quests, when you'll go into underground cave or whatever, and they will double team and triple team you, and you will get screwed.
Yeah, I think it's generally a symptom of these kinds of RPGs that
it is. I mean, almost all games do this. Like they can't manage to keep the enemies at the right level to the end of the game.
They're open world games. I mean, that is a tough one. I think we need to get back to Amalur because.
But I think this is pertinent to Amalur.
Sure, yeah. This is the main criticism of Amalur, or at least my main criticism.
No, I think most people's. I mean, they felt like the end of the game kind of lost its luster because there was no challenge left.
Right, and it's basically because these kinds of games rely on stats to challenge you, and if you get to a point where you're sort of overwhelming the stats that the enemies have, then it becomes a joke.
It becomes a joke. It's irrelevant, right? You're like, I don't care about any of this crap I'm collecting anymore because I don't need a weapon any more powerful than the one I have right now. I don't need magic any more powerful than what I have right now.
Yeah.
It is kind of a nail in the coffin, so to speak.
Well, I think one of the things that it does do phenomenally well, and again, Miguel and I have discussed this, is the way it scales the skill tree. The fact that you can just switch back and forth between all three, as you can in Skyrim as well. But the fact that you can be might, stealth, or magic, and you can just pick a mix as you go, and it's to say you can be a mage and hold a sword, and you can customize that.
It was very thoughtfully done, and they made it so that any sort of weird combination you could think of, it's hard. It was hard to like make yourself a shitty character because they provided for so
Which
much.
is
in
great,
there.
right? Because
Yeah.
I always hate the archetypes where it's like, whoa, what? My magic can't get all that powerful because I use a sword. Like, I hate that crap.
I
Like,
can't wear heavy armor, and I'm going
Right.
to get absolutely
Well, you know,
every time.
of course, if you like put points willy nilly, you are going to be shitty. But I don't think very many people do that, right? Like if you kind of have in mind, okay, I want to do everything equally well. The game has systems in place, the destinies that make it so that works out. Yeah. And that's cool, and that's what I really like about that. And in my opinion, that's another element of gameplay too, a system that allows you to play the game in all these different ways.
sure.
I think on the negative side, the first thing that disappointed me when I booted up the final version after playing the demo was that frigging camera.
Yeah, a lot of people have been complaining about the
camera system. They should have fixed it. It's just one of those things that it's it's difficult to lock. Actually impossible, I think, to lock on you, and it can get, especially when you have a lot of enemies coming at you. And
well, yeah, the camera's all you, right? Like you have to guide it every step of the way.
And it can get a little bit annoying and dizzying, and you don't really, it's like, because of the way you can't zoom out far enough to see who's attacking you from behind, so you're looking at the mini map. That's glitch number one for me.
It made for cool footage though when we were capturing it. Like you would swing the camera and it wouldn't be the exact right angle, but it happened to be like a very dramatic one. So that was a happy.
I think the other thing is the way they manage the conversations. The fact that if when you have a conversation with somebody in Skyrim and Fable or whatever, Mass Effect, these are games that do the conversations phenomenally well. And it's not a criticism of the voice acting, it's a criticism of the actual interface, where I'm just scrolling through options left, right, scrolling through, and I don't really feel invested.
It's the same thing as in the first Dragon Age, where you're the silent protagonist.
Yeah.
And that's always a challenge, right? Like you have that on one end where you're just like a static model that's reacting to things or not reacting, just picking dialogue. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's like Commander Shepard, where it's a character that it's really just doing its own thing with some input from you, but ultimately it's there to tell its own story. Like, what is the happy medium there, though?
Well, I think the first issue I have is that if I'm going to have a conversation and I want to talk to people, I really don't want to have to see the same. And the same problem with Skyrim, actually. I don't want to see the same conversations just slightly grayed out, but I can still access them. Right. I don't want them on the screen. I don't want to re-ask the same thing hundreds and hundreds of times. I just didn't like that looking at that little box in the middle of the screen. It felt like it just felt. Because they got a pretty good production level. I mean, there are high quality production standards in the game in general.
Flea market free.
It just took me out of it. It just didn't really feel. It didn't pull me back in. And this leads on to the next thing where I have an issue with, which is the totally forgettable story. And considering
the game seems generic.
Yeah,
I have not played through the game yet, but just as an outsider who's watched a ton of it being played,
I'm someone who's relatively into fantasy, and I think this was a cool fantasy world. It wasn't. I mean, to sort of distill it to its essence, like most fantasy games that I play are basically drawn from Tolkien.
Right.
This kind of draws from Western folklore in a way that I think is cool. And it felt fresh to me. I wanted to explore the world. The problem I had, and I think it's the same as what you're talking about, Marcus, is that in the beginning it starts off with this really strong thrust of a story, and then the minute you set out into the world, you're just provided with like a billion distractions. Like, okay, there's this big important shit going on, but I want you to go kill some spiders over here, and then like, hey, I lost my keys over there, and hey, there's some books scattered around the world. You want to go collect
Shane,
them over here?
You might actually like it because you wouldn't do any of the side quests whatsoever. But there are, and it goes back to this MMO feel. And I did some research, and it was originally meant to be an MMO.
No, I think that's false. Actually, I think people have confused the fact that 38 is working on another MMO in the same universe. I think I've seen that on the internet. That's actually not true.
It almost feels like an MMO where they pulled the netcode out.
Yeah.
It does feel.
It has an MMO in its DNA.
Ambitious. But yeah, I mean the side quests, a lot of them are very, very generic. I mean, some are kind of cool, but I just honestly, other than, and I've been playing this for almost a week now. Other than the phase, I can't remember anything else about the frigging game with regards to the characters.
Yeah, and
I can remember.
I think a lot of RPGs are like that, though. I mean, even I thought Skyrim, a lot of the characters I didn't remember them.
But the thing I can remember is that I've just got a really kick-ass pair of chakrams that are absolutely phenomenal. I've unlocked a couple of combos, and that to me, they could have literally done away with the story, made it linear, and just thrown missions at you randomly, and I would have just been just as happy.
Well, you can still, I mean, there's never any doubt as to what you have to do to further the story. And if you just beeline the story, it'll take you, 20 hours or so. you're done with that, and then the whole world is still there if you want to grind and find more like shitty epic loot.
Now, whether I wanted it or not, I have been essentially completely absorbed in this game for the last several weeks. All the stuff that we've done with it for GT Live, having them on the show, all the big hubbub over the demo. Being an outsider, it appears to me that this is an excellent game that has one fatal flaw. Because a lot of the stuff that you guys are talking about here the last couple minutes are things that a lot of games have issues with. Skyrim's had some of those issues. It's stuff that you've learned to kind of look over, or you just accept every game kind of has its flaws. But it does have that one fatal issue, which is the last act of the game has no tension in it. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I would say also, like, depending on how much you play, until you get to the last act, it can get easy much sooner than that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe some people aren't bothered by that. Maybe some people like to feel as if they're steamrolling the whole world.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's fun for a while. Like, for me, it stopped being fun the minute I unlocked my last spell, because...
Well, I think after you've unlocked the last spell and you've done it about 20 times, that's probably the point where you reach the fatigue.
Sure. Yeah. All things considered, though, I'm glad I played it. I think it's fun. I think it's hard to deny how appealing a game that has combat like this can be.
You think the sequel could be something amazing?
Yeah, I mean, I want to see more of this world. I think it's a cool fantasy world, and I basically have faith in the people who make this game.
Think about it. This is their first game, and bugs.
They've nailed the combat.
All the issues you've seen in a lot of Bethesda's games, who have made these games for years and years, these guys did a pretty good job right out of the gate.
I will absolutely agree with you, but I will counter that with your companion AI on a lot of missions. $1 a post, where it's literally I'd run into a cavern and my AI character would run to the door. I'd go pick up some treasure, and all of a sudden I'm surrounded by 15 harpies, and he's still waiting by the doors. Like, I literally have to run over to him to pull him into the battle radius, if you will.
Yeah, I noticed that, or else like they would just all of a sudden
teleporting.
If you met up with an NPC for a quest, all of a sudden like that NPC became the player and you were the guy following it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I think for people like these games, would both of you guys recommend at least renting it?
Oh, absolutely.
I definitely say it's a rent. And look, let me qualify for some statements. I'm a big fan of Fable 3 and Fable 2, predominantly for that universe that with the English accents and Stephen Fry's voiceover. And this to me feels like something that's got a huge amount of potential now. I just think they need perhaps a little more discipline in regards to the amount of quests they put into it. I'd rather go for quality over quantity, and it does feel to me like Fable without the sense of humor.
Obviously, anyone who has ever glimpsed a Fae would know that. Unlike little Egan here, your head holds more than fantasies.
All right, that's it for episode 197. A pretty strapping episode, if I do say so myself. Some really good discussion today. Don't forget, on Monday, we will be blowing out the PlayStation Vita live on GT Live at 6 p.m. Pacific.
Did you say blowing up?
Blowing out.
Because that would be funny. Let's get a Vita and blow it up.
Yeah,
Ryan's no longer here to protest the timing for this.
Miguel, do you know anybody who can get us some fireworks?
So on Monday, make sure you check that out. And don't forget, Invisible Walls episode 200 live, at least an hour long. If it goes well, maybe we'll run a little bit over.
And I just want to let you know that March 1st is actually the St. David's Day, which is the patron saint of Wales. So just like, St. Patrick's Day, all you Americans get drunk, I'm going to be pretty slathered.
You're going to fry some sheep, man?
You're going to wear your woolly boxers for me?
Sure thing, baby.
Thursday, March 1st at 6 p.m., Invisible Walls episode 200 live, bitches. We'll see you next week. Invisible Walls is up and out.